Namibia's land question, 28 years after independence.
It's time to share.
I cannot share because then I cannot live the life that I want to lead.
How do you respond to criticism that former liberation movements like yourselves sold out?
No, definitely not. As I
That
said,
you overcompromised?
no,
That
never.
you shouldn't have accepted willing buyer, willing seller?
No, there was no other alternative. And as freedom fighters, we were also tired of staying in the bush.
Namibia's 800,000 square kilometers of land seems infinite. It's 2/3 the size of South Africa and has only 2 million citizens, 3% of our population. But it's the driest country in sub-Saharan Africa, with desert lining the length of its coastline. There's not enough fertile land to go around. At 83 years of age, Ida Hoversab's prospects for land ownership in Namibia are slim. She's ineligible for any of the 3 main land reform strategies adopted by government post-independence. Resettlement, designed to give land back to the black majority. The Affirmative Action Loan Scheme, to establish a black middle class of farmers. And communal land tenure, which seeks to give black people living on communal land title deeds. Ida is Damara from South Central Namibia. She was born on a white-owned farm in Ouagana. She and her parents lived on white farms from the time she was born until they died. She became a farm laborer at the age of 15, but her former employers dumped her here in 1994 when she became too frail to work. Ida is one of the first and oldest residents of Omitara, a shanty town near an abandoned railway station about 100 kilometers outside the capital Windhoek. It is known in Namibia as the dumping ground for farm laborers. She and 45 other families started the settlement. People here feel discarded and disenfranchised. It's fertile ground for a new political movement agitating for radical change to Namibia's land policy. Many here, like Ida, are former farm workers and feel bitter about their lot. The issue of land resonates. The leader of the recently formed Landless People's Movement is Bernadus Swartbooi, a former deputy land minister. He fell out with his ruling party bosses and left Swartbooi in 2016. He is Nama and wants rights to ancestral lands to be included in the country's land reform policy.
The biggest correction that has to take place, Ms. Mabuse, is the correction on land. That is the biggest correction.
He also believes land reform should be incorporated into agriculture and considered in urban planning. He has some progressive ideas, so why did he not implement them while inside government?
Deputy Minister is just a nobody. The people that are important in our governments are the ministers and the permanent secretaries. You don't sign any document, you don't make policy, you are not a member of cabinet. You are merely a help.
He's counting on voters like Ida to help him get the power he needs to change policy come elections next year. In the last general election, Swartbooi got more than 86% of the vote.
I don't think that the issues are actually just about land.
It's also about the state of the nation, says lawyer Delme Cupido of the Open Society Initiative of Southern Africa. He specializes in indigenous people's rights.
I think it is about sort of unequal development. It's a feeling that ethnically some groups are being excluded. In a sense, it is sort of playing politics with land. But I suppose a more generous way of seeing it is that they're using the land issue as a platform for speaking about the state of the nation and what they believe is wrong with the nation. There's a perception by people in the south of the country that all the development goes to the cities and that most of it goes to the north of the country. The rise of the Landless People's Movement, for example, that's a movement which has its genesis really in that complaint.
If dispossession from ancestral land was a criteria for resettlement, Ida could qualify for the land that the Damara claim is theirs in the south.
You know, the south is where the diamonds are, the south is where most of the marine resources are, and these are the main economic drivers.
In Namibia, to qualify for resettlement on land purchased by the state, candidates are required to have a farming background. Some of these former farm workers worked as domestic staff and not on the land. To get an affirmative action loan, one must have assets that can be used as collateral. All some residents of Omitara have is a few goats to their names. Land reform beneficiaries are now also required to be literate.
It does leave out the people that one would imagine should be the primary targets and beneficiaries of land reform.
This wasn't always the case in Namibia. According to Land Minister Utoni Nujoma, government has had to tighten the criteria because the original requirements, being black and landless, didn't meet the policy's objectives.
The land reform process in Namibia has not been very successful.
Nujoma is the son of Namibia's founding father, Sam Nujoma.
I, Sam Nujoma.
His father became Namibia's first president in 1990 after it gained independence from apartheid South Africa.
Almost the first thing that the government did, the incoming government did, was to convene a land conference.
Namibia's new rulers pledged to use land reform as a vehicle to correct inequalities.
So when Namibia started with its redistribution, or what they call a resettlement program, in the early 1990s, the focus was on the poor explicitly. The expectation was that small-scale farmers, especially from the communal areas, but also farm workers, people who have a history of being on the land, want their own land, and that the state would assist them to get modest parcels of land to work and to improve their livelihoods. So it was very much a bottom-up vision of development. But by the late 1990s, there were political shifts within Namibia, and a frustrated growing middle class was saying, but why can't we get land?
At independence, whites made up 6% of the population, but held 52% of the country's agriculturally viable land and owned 97% of the country's commercial farms. The remainder of the land was communally owned by the black majority in water-starved, underdeveloped and underutilized parts of the country. Coming up after the break.
We have met our white compatriots in the farming sector, and we've said to them, it's time to share.
I cannot share because then I cannot live the life that I want to lead.